Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
And welcome to All Indiana Politics on this Sunday. We start today with the House approving the president's Build Back Better plan. It was a straight party line vote in the House Friday morning on the 2,135-page bill. The social spending plan includes universal preschool, money to cover child care costs, and a continuation of the child tax credit. Reaction from Indiana's congressional delegation is what you would expect. Democrat Congressman Andre Carson calls the plan a bold step towards greater opportunity, progress, and prosperity, and a once-in-a-generation investment in Hoosiers and all Americans. Republican Jim Banks calls the plan shameful. He says Democrats cast a vote to turn the country socialist and that working families will lose in the end. It's one of the questions for Congresswoman Jackie Walorski. And let's welcome in Congresswoman Jackie Walorski now. Congresswoman, thank you for taking some time. Why don't we start with the Biden administration's mandate vaccine-wise? Senator Braun, I know, pushing to put an end to it. You also have a bill that would also do the same. Why do you think this isn't good?
Oh my gosh, this is devastating. And obviously we're hearing from Hoosiers because we represent Hoosiers, but you know, we've been crushed. Our office has been crushed with small business owners, CEOs, you name it, workers, TSA people, people from all walks of life, all kinds of places, literally going to lose their job. And you know, I've never seen in my lifetime a president or an administration that looks for ways to people to lose their jobs or get forced out of their companies over something like this kind of mandate. You know, I think it's extremely unconstitutional. I will say this, with OSHA's announcement yesterday of having to stay because the courts told them to stay and they're not going to go in and they're not going to roll this program out. What a relief. That's the best news I've heard in a week, a month. But let me tell you something, in the medical community, the healthcare workers are looking through HHS at some just unbelievable parameters that they have to be bound within. And it's devastating to Hoosier hospitals and nursing homes. And we're fighting that one right now.
Let me play devil's advocate here because Democrats will point to the fact that they also have a testing proponent as well, meaning that you don't have to get vaccinated. You could get tested as long as you can prove that you're negative. You could still come to work. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, obviously this administration has made it a priority to not work with the American people and work to keep them employed. You know, this nation lost more jobs in September and October than the history of this country. So I would say what I expect out of any administration, this one or any other administration, is to keep people connected, help them find jobs, help them keep their jobs, help them build back the American dream that they had before COVID. The last thing we need is to slow down this economy and to put people's health in jeopardy. And that's what we're looking at right now. But good news in the private sector. I don't believe in any federal mandates, and I never will. And this is no exception. You know, let the American people be the American people and get off their backs and let them produce for their family and the American dream.
All right, we'll see what happens. We'll keep a close eye on it. Of course, let's talk about the infrastructure bill now. Does it help or hurt Indiana?
Well, I think that, you know, our delegation all voted no. And the reason we voted no is because this wasn't just a clean infrastructure bill. This was not about sitting around and saying what roads, bridges, and those kind of things do we need to repair in the state of Indiana. This is inadvertently connected to a $4 trillion tax and spend bill, the biggest in the history of this country. And they're not separated, and they are together. And what I said, what I believe, having served in the Indiana House, is that Indiana knows its plans better than anybody else. Indiana knows how to take care of our state, rebuild our infrastructure, and be good stewards of that money. And I'm sure they will be when some of that money makes its way to the state of Indiana. But as lawmakers, there is no way we would vote on something that's connected to robbing every single Hoosier of all their disposable income through a tax and spend bill. They're the ones paying for it.
I figure you would probably feel the same in regards to the social spending bill as well.
Oh my gosh. I mean, when Joe Biden stands on TV and says, if you make under $400,000, you will not see a tax increase. Everybody across the board is seeing tax increases in our districts in the state of Indiana, in inflation, in gas prices, in every single thing that we touch. This is the most expensive Thanksgiving we're ever going to experience. And this, Propane's going up 50%. You know, when I think of this kind of news, I think of senior citizens at home on fixed incomes. Nobody is doing them any favors. And coming down the pike, possibly, anytime very soon, that this bill will pass the House with Democratic votes, probably no Republican votes, go to the Senate, and then have major work done to it there before it comes back to the House. But this is a disaster of a bill. It's a disgrace as what we're looking at in this country, trying to overcome COVID, get our economy back together, get people working, and at the same time, out of left field, come the biggest tax increase they've ever seen, and they're feeling it.
As you very well know, the House voted this week to censure Representative Paul Gosar. Did it go too far?
Well, this is the second time we've experienced this since January. And I think, I'm the ranking member of the Ethics Committee, and I was on the floor defending the institution of the Ethics Committee, created by Speaker Pelosi. And now to subvert it and to take all power over both parties instead of letting each party regulate and discipline itself. This is a major power grab. This is what's happening here. Major power grab, not only to every American, but to the minority side of Congress as well. We would do just fine if they didn't have the power grabs.
We appreciate it. Representative Jackie Walorski, thank you.
Thanks.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
You too.
All right, coming up, Democrats push a new key item in Indiana, legalizing marijuana. We go one-on-one with the Marion County prosecutor next on All Indiana Politics. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics. Let's turn now to the new push from Indiana Democrats to legalize marijuana. Democrats across the state launched the platform this week, calling it a hallmark issue next year during both the legislative session and midterm elections. Republican House Speaker Todd Houston has already indicated the bill is not likely to get much traction during the session. One key supporter of the plan, though, Marion County Prosecutor Ryan Mears. He's with our Richard Essex.
The conversation of legalizing or decriminalizing marijuana has been going around the country for years. Why is now the time in Indiana?
Well, I think it's long overdue. If you take a look at the success that other states have had when they've made the decision to legalize marijuana, I think it's been a benefit both economically and also from a social justice perspective in terms of not prosecuting those cases. And I think what we've seen here in Marion County individually, once we've made the decision to stop prosecuting those cases, we think it's gone a long way towards helping us establish trust in the community, but also eliminate some of the racial disparities that we see in the criminal justice system.
You wrote a lengthy article about it earlier this week. Elaborate on some of the points you made.
Well, I think when we evaluate this decision, I think it's twofold. Number one, without question, unfortunately, African Americans were more likely to be arrested and prosecuted for simple possession of marijuana cases. And I think it's important that we address that racial disparity issue. But I also think it's important that taxpayers know where their money is going and what are we spending our money on in terms of prosecutions. And between 2017 and 2019, we filed 2,100 simple possession of marijuana cases. By not filing those cases, we freed up our deputy prosecutors to pursue other charges. In particular, we've redeployed those prosecutors to address violent crime. And we've also reduced the burden that we've put on some of our partners like the crime lab. I think it's important for everybody to realize that when we talk about testing for marijuana, that's a significant expense to the county, and we're no longer requiring the crime lab to do that, which is freeing up additional resources to work on our DUI cases, process our homicide scenes, and do the types of works that we need to do to successfully prosecute violent crime.
There are going to be some people who are going to say that marijuana is a gateway drug, you're being soft on criminals, and what's your response?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is, number one, I think this is a racial disparity issue when we look at who ultimately got prosecuted. But I also think the other part of this, when we have this conversation about gateway drugs, the number one most filed charge in Marion County this year is going to be DUI cases. That's the number one charge. And I don't see a lot of people clamoring for us to ban alcohol or let's more regulate alcohol. And that's the number one issue that we deal with every single day. I think what we need to do is come up with a system in place that allows us to regulate marijuana. Let's allow us to also collect revenue from the sale of marijuana, because people are continuing to do it, and we're not seeing much of a benefit in terms of as the bottom line as it comes to public safety.
And there are going to be others that say that you're being an activist, that changing the law is really the job of the General Assembly, not the job of the prosecutor. The job of the prosecutor is to prosecute the laws as they're written. What's your response?
Well, I certainly understand people's perspective on that, but for me, when I look at this, the Equal Protection Clause in the United States Constitution says that the law has to apply equally to everyone. And in the case of enforcement of marijuana, it just wasn't happening. If you look at usage rates among people who use marijuana, amongst white people and African Americans, and then you look at who ends up being in the criminal justice system, there was a significant disparity there. And I took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and the Equal Protection Clause says the law needs to apply to everyone equally. And it just wasn't happening as it related to possession of marijuana cases. And so I think it's incumbent upon me as a prosecutor to recognize and acknowledge those disparities and do something about it.
When you took over as prosecutor 2 years ago in 2019, it was one of the very first things that you did was stop prosecuting these marijuana cases, these simple marijuana cases. Have you regretted that decision at all?
No, not at all, because it's been a tremendous benefit to the community. And it's also freed up resources for us so we can devote more time, energy, and effort to violent crime. And I think it's sent a clear message to the community that we're going to focus on the things that truly impact public safety. And whether or not someone makes the decision to smoke a joint in their backyard, I don't think necessarily needs to involve the Marion County Prosecutor's Office or law enforcement. Let's focus on the things that are truly important. And let's not waste our time on people who want to make a personal choice to consume marijuana.
Now, marijuana still is being shipped into Marion County. It's still being shipped into the state of Indiana, and it's being brought in by people that are of nefarious backgrounds. Have you prosecuted any drug trafficking that is strictly marijuana in the past 2 years?
Yeah, absolutely we have. And so, our policy relates strictly to simple possession, those less than 30 grams. And certainly when we come across individuals who are possessing way more than 30 grams, we're going to continue to move forward with a prosecution. The one thing that we are seeing, though, is when we talk about people with nefarious backgrounds, we're seeing more and more people who are just making that trip to Illinois or Michigan to buy marijuana, who don't necessarily have a criminal record, but they can purchase it there safely and legally. And the state of Indiana is missing out on those dollars. And then we're now asking the prosecutor's office, law enforcement, the crime lab, and the courts to prosecute those individuals for something that they purchased legally across the border.
Now, prior to you coming into the office, there were people that were prosecuted for simple possession or for just having a small amount on them. They still have a record. Would you support removing those crimes from those records?
Absolutely. I think everybody who was previously convicted of possession of marijuana, simple possession of marijuana, should be entitled to an expungement. If anybody applies for an expungement, we're going to wholeheartedly support that petition. It would be nice if the law addressed that issue and allow those convictions to be expunged.
Prosecutor, we appreciate your time this morning. Marion County Prosecutor Ryan Mears, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, our political experts are ready to talk about that and a potential tax cut here in Indiana next on All Indiana Politics. All right, welcome back to All Indiana Politics on this Sunday as we welcome in Republican Ali Bartlett and Democrat Laura Beck. Good to see you both. Let's get right to that discussion about legalizing marijuana here in Indiana, if you don't mind, ladies. Ali, we'll let you get the first word.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for having me back. I'm excited to be here and talk about this. I think Democrats coming out with this statement about their goal to legalize marijuana during the 2022 legislative session is just a little short-sighted. It seems kind of like a convenient talking point right now, but whether or not it will actually happen remains to be seen. I think the Indiana legislature, though, and its Republican leadership has shown a good track record with this topic in the last several years, especially. And I think that goes to show that we're going to take the time to explore this in the right way, just like we do everything else. We don't have to make decisions that aren't data driven. And so I think they will take the time to consider this and do it in a way that's really policy driven, because we have been such good stewards of tax dollars that we don't necessarily need the revenue boost. So I just think that offers them a really good chance to explore the concept and do it in the right way. And I think they'll take the time to do that.
I'll go back to the revenue in a moment. Laura, I'll let you respond, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, frankly, I'm heartened to hear Allie say that rather than just take it out of hand and dismiss it out of hand. It definitely does deserve some study. We do know, though, that it's been studied around us. And as Prosecutor Muir said, we are losing tax money to the states around us where you can purchase it legally. So that tax money is going to Illinois, it's going to Michigan. The other thing I think that we also can see, too, is this isn't totally new. Jonathan Weinzapfel, when he ran for Attorney General in 2020, actually endorsed legalizing marijuana, is the revenue generating capabilities of it. So we talk about how we can't pay teachers enough, or we talk about we can't fund a full day pre-K. But this would generate between $150 and $170 million each year. And as Prosecutor Muir said, from a very practical standpoint, it does level the playing field in eliminating some of these racial disparities that we see. So it certainly does open the door. I hope the legislature will take some time on it. It does already have bipartisan support.
Yeah.
You've got folks like Jim Lucas who are supportive. So I think it's a really positive step forward.
Allie, let's talk about the money. That's a lot of money that we're missing out on. As Laura said, it's going to Illinois and Michigan and other states across the country. Your response?
Yeah, absolutely. Fortunately, like I said, the Indiana legislature and Governor Holcomb and governors before Governor Holcomb have been such efficient stewards of our tax dollars here in Indiana that, as I'm sure we'll discuss in additional conversation throughout this segment, Indiana is not hurting for revenue. We are very good at spending our money and not spending our money efficiently and wisely. And so I don't think that this should be a conversation about revenue. I think it's a little bit, like I said, it's short-sighted to make a decision about something like this that can impact, public health and safety.
What about the racial disparity part?
I'm a little confused by that talking point. I think, when we're talking about racial disparities related to crime, that's just a separate discussion entirely. Like I said, I think just the bottom line here is that we can't make a decision like this on the basis of a revenue generator because we don't need the revenue in that way. So if we're going to do this, we need to do it in the right way when we have a good policy reason to do so. And I think the legislature will be completely open to studying the policy reasons behind making a move like this, but doing it for just on the basis of losing revenue to states next door or surrounding us, that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me when we have enough revenue.
We could talk about this for an entire half hour, but let's move on to taxes, because we heard this week that some Republican state lawmakers may move to pass a tax cut in the next General Assembly. Allie, I'll stay with you here. Is this something that most Republicans will support when it comes up next year?
Yeah, so I think this just kind of bleeds over from what I was saying before. Indiana has always been good stewards of our tax dollars. We know how to spend and save wisely. And as a result of that, and partially as a result of stimulus money that we saw come in from COVID, we do have this extra revenue on hand to consider potential tax cuts. I think obviously historically the Republican Party is supportive of tax cuts. I think it's going to be something that is going to be heavily discussed during the upcoming session. I think there's going to be a good middle ground that comes out between people who think a tax cut initiative this year makes sense versus a tax cut initiative during the budget session. Yeah. But that's why the Republican
Laura, I want to get you in here because we have about a minute left. How do you argue against this?
Thank you. Well, I think there's two things. One is I have never, ever heard any Republican turn down a revenue generating idea. So, I mean, to think that the General Assembly is not going to take that into account is silly. Secondly, I think another piece we have to also look at is, yes, we have some extra money in our coffers. We've got a lot of money coming in from the stimulus that, Jackie Walorski and everybody else hates, Jim Banks hates, but, they're all going to be posing with a bunch of big checks here in about another, 12 months. I think from a really practical standpoint, I agree with Senator Messmer in the Senate, who basically said this week, look, we have some extra money right now, but instead of trying to spend it, let's be really practical and wait until a budget year. So I think if you're going to practice financial stewardship and you're going to be conservative and be mindful of how that money is spent, you're going to wait until a budget year until you realize where those funds are going to go from the stimulus.
Okay. Good conversation, ladies. Always good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Thanks.
Take all Indiana politics on the go with you. Download our podcast now. Part of the All Indiana Podcast Network and allindianapodcastnetwork.com.
All right, thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30, including an interview with Indiana's Commissioner of Higher Education. Also, we'd like to invite you to join our support of the Moselle Sanders Thanksgiving dinner. You can donate online right now at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend. And from all of us here at Wish TV, have a great Thanksgiving.